Confessions are supposed to end investigations. They represent a moment of certainty, a point where questions finally stop being necessary. Once someone admits guilt, the narrative feels complete. In this case, that sense of certainty arrived quickly. A confession was given, and almost immediately, the investigation slowed. Because on paper, the case appeared solved. The confession didn't sound vague or confused. It followed the general sequence investigators already believed was true. Events were described in the right order. The timing felt plausible. The location matched what was known. Even the tone felt cooperative. There was no resistance, no visible struggle. To investigators, this looked like closure. There was no immediate reason to doubt what they were hearing. False confessions are commonly viewed as rare exceptions, and when people imagine them, they expect obvious warning signs: extreme confusion, internal contradictions, emotional instability. None of that was obvious here, which made the confession easier to accept. This is where a powerful assumption begins to take control. Many people believe an innocent person would never confess, that admitting guilt is something only the guilty would do. It feels intuitive, almost obvious. After all, why would anyone admit to something they didn't do? This belief is reinforced by how confessions are portrayed in movies, in documentaries, in courtrooms. Confession equals truth. Case closed. This is treated as a myth by many. But is it really? As the investigation continued, subtle details began to surface. Not dramatic contradictions, not anything that demanded immediate attention. Just small inconsistencies, minor facts that didn't align perfectly with the physical evidence. At first, they seemed easy to explain away. Investigators told themselves these gaps were normal. Stress can distort memory. Pressure can blur details. Time can rearrange recollections. And more importantly, the confession was already on record. That fact alone carried weight, but inconsistencies rarely stay isolated. One unexplained detail becomes another. Small gaps begin to connect. At first, these connections feel uncomfortable. They challenge the version of events that already feels settled. So they're often minimized, treated as noise, or coincidence. But over time, patterns emerge. And patterns demand attention. Because coincidence rarely repeats itself this consistently, certain statements no longer aligned with the crime scene. Some descriptions conflicted with measurable evidence. Other details felt unusually precise. Not recalled. Rehearsed. As if learned, rather than experienced. At that point, investigators faced a dilemma. Challenging the confession meant reopening the case, re-examining decisions already made. It meant acknowledging uncertainty, and uncertainty has consequences. Institutional ones, psychological ones. Confessions carry enormous psychological weight, not just legally, but cognitively. Once accepted, they shape how every new detail is interpreted. Information that fits the confession is emphasized. Information that doesn't fit is softened, reframed, or explained away. This isn't always intentional. It's human. The narrative begins to bend around the confession. Slowly. Quietly. Not the other way around. Eventually, the contradictions became harder to ignore. Independent reviews raised concerns. External experts began questioning key assumptions. The confidence that once surrounded the confession began to erode. What once felt like certainty now felt dangerous. The confession wasn't closing the case. It was narrowing it, steering the investigation in a single direction, possibly away from the truth. Today, the case sits in a very different place. The confession is no longer treated as definitive. Its reliability remains contested. The investigation itself remains unresolved. And the original questions still stand. What this case ultimately reveals isn't just a procedural failure. It reveals how easily certainty can replace caution. Certainty feels efficient. It saves time. It reduces discomfort. Caution does the opposite. It slows things down. It keeps questions open. and that tension is difficult to live with. But when certainty arrives too early, it can quietly push the truth further away. If you found this case unsettling, that reaction makes sense. Because sometimes, the most convincing answers are the ones that deserve the most scrutiny. You liked this? This is Dark Minute. Curious for more? Access Dark Minute.